We welcome you to another live edition of the Sports Box, brought to you by our sponsor, Showcase Sports in Hamilton. Showcase Sports for the elite athlete. And by our friends over at CrowdPlay. Download the free CrowdPlay app today and check them out at www.crowdplayapp.com for details. Ladies and gentlemen, it's showtime.
Hey everybody, welcome to a special edition of Cage My IQ. I am your host, D-Bake. I am joined with me by MMA legend Chris Leben. How's it going, Chris?
Good, man. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. I know you're a busy guy, and then for you to take time out of your day, I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yep. Just to get started, I'll start right now. One of the questions I had for you was, how was life growing up in Oregon?
Well, oh man, that's a big one. You know, I grew up on Mount Hood up until about 7th grade, and pretty much all that sucked. When I was in 7th grade, I moved to Portland. Lived downtown for a while and got into skateboarding, my friends down there. And then life was pretty good, man. Just running around the streets of Portland, staying out all night skateboarding and, having fun with the boys. I didn't spend a lot of time at home, but, my adolescent years were pretty fun, pretty good time.
How much did you respect your mom? Because from what I read, she worked several jobs so she could afford everything for you guys. How was that?
Well, my mom was, she's a meth head, but she was functioning and she's single mother, raising a couple kids and my sister, which is much younger, so life was not easy on her. It was she worked her ass off. She also always had tweakers over at my house sorting through laundry at 4 a.m. So there's even today mixed emotions,
Which is understandable. Yeah, but another thing I read was what about the UFC intrigued you when you first saw it? I read that you saw it on TV and you just gravitated towards watching it when you were younger. Is there something that you saw back then that made you want to eventually learn MMA and join the UFC?
I don't know what it was. Even my friends from middle school, would tell me that I said back then, hey, I'm going to be a UFC fighter. And, growing up just being a punk skateboarder, for some reason, also in 7th grade, I decided that I was going to start catching the bus across town to box. Looking back, none of my friends were into boxing. Nobody was. I don't know what. Maybe it was, just my older brother was an asshole. We got in fights a lot. And I, had kind of a rough childhood. So, I gravitated towards it for some reason. Started boxing in 7th and 8th grade. And then, in high school, it's a long story, but I got tripped by a jock and I was like, fuck that guy. Joined the wrestling team the next day, ended up taking this varsity spot, and then, wrestling for me is definitely it's pretty much the only reason I graduated high school at all. It was the camaraderie of the wrestling team, all that stuff. I had to stay in school to wrestle, and ultimately, by the time I was a junior or senior, I was wrestling year round. I was in a club wrestling. So after high school, a little brief stint in the military. Didn't work out exactly the way I had planned, but I got out, and I missed that. I missed that team unity and that camaraderie. And my brother called me and he said, hey man, I'm working at this car lot and Randy Couture and Matt Lindland are kicking the shit out of each other back. And I went, what? you're kidding me. I'm on my way. You know, obviously I was a huge UFC fan at the time. This was back in, I don't know, maybe 2001 or something like that, a long time ago, you know. And so got there, signed up, started training the next day, you know, and then 6 months down the road, had my first fight, man. That's pretty much how that all went down.
Did you see it as some sort of release from like your everyday life? I know you said you had like mixed emotions about like with your mom, like being home and everything like that. Did you see it as like like I said, like a release to where it was like a positive environment where you
Absolutely.
could go and then just do what you like to do?
I mean, it's pretty common knowledge, you know. I've had my ups and downs, you know, outside of the cage, you know, alcohol and drugs, you know, getting arrested, all those sorts of things when I was young, you know. And to be honest with you, man, if it wasn't for martial arts, if it wasn't for the again the camaraderie, the gym, the guys at the gym, I think that's what kept me alive, kept me out of jail, kept me from getting too fucked up on drugs or going to the harder ones, you know. Gave me something, you know. I remember, you know, my first fight, you know, training, you know, you know, like, all right, I'm not going to drink for a week, you know, I'm not going to drink for a week or party because I'm going to win this thing, you know. And then I told every one of my friends, and my mom was there and everything else. And, you know, and I was like going out to the fight, like, what the heck was I thinking, you know? And, ultimately I won. It was the greatest feeling I'd ever had. And the next day I remember, you know, my friend calling me saying, hey man, there's this forum and there's people talking about you. I'm like, what? There's like 12 people talking about me? Dude, I was hooked. And you know, from that day on, you know, I was an MMA addict, you know. And you know, that's what I eat, sleep, breathe was training and fighting. And you know, thank God for it, because it's what kept me on track enough to be sitting here talking to you today.
Yeah, like I've heard so many stories about athletes in all other sports or anything say that with how strict like the rules are now with everything, with all the extracurricular stuff, that they would be doing drugs or whatever, but then they would have to stop at a certain point because they knew that uh, like the season or whatever would start, and then they wouldn't be able to because they didn't want to ruin their chances getting tested positive or whatnot. So they would have to cut it off for so long of a time, and it winds up working out for people. Like it sucks that some people like just get addicted so much, and then luckily for you, you got sober later on down the line. But it's a good thing that, like you said, you had MMA because it was like a
Yeah,
release.
because even though I didn't get, you know, you know, a tree doesn't blow over with its first gust of wind. You know, it's got to
Yeah.
rock back and forth for a while. And I was blessed enough to have something that I loved enough to straighten me out for, you know, a couple weeks or a month, you know, and get me back on track, get me healthy. You know, and I get, you know, that luckily I had that. It kept me alive, you know.
Now, when you joined Team Quest, what skills did you need to refine before starting your amateur career? Like I read that the they let you in, but then it was like I think it was like 6 months before your first amateur fight, and it said something about how you had to work on a few skills before they would let you fight.
So my coach, rest in peace, Robert Follis. You know, he used to love to tell this story about me, you know, because my first day I signed up. Then my second day I came in, he says, hey Chris, how you doing? I said, you get me a fight yet? The third day I came in and he said, how you doing, Chris? Did you get me a fight yet? That's the exact phrase I used to greet him for the first 6 months. He didn't want me to fight in 6 months. He didn't think I was ready, but I asked him every single day, you know. And you know, I trained for 3 hours a day. You know, I went in, did grappling, boxing, and MMA every day at night. And then it wasn't long before I was working there. I was teaching some class. By the time it was a year training, I was already working there, teaching some basic
Oh,
classes,
cool.
front desk work. I basically just moved into the gym. I was like, I'm here. I'm a fighter. This is what I do. And yeah, man. Like when I look back at my first fight, it's not pretty. We grow and we mature over the years. We refine our skills, and that's definitely the case with me. I mean, ultimately, I had some wrestling, high school wrestling background, a little bit of boxing, you know, and honestly, at the time, it was a different era. I mean, we were a bunch of wrestlers in that original Team Quest was a bunch of wrestlers trying to run an MMA practice like a wrestling practice, 100%. Dudes were getting knocked out every day. We were just fucking fighting each other, and you got real tough. You didn't develop a ton of skill, had some great wrestling. I gotta say most of my Greco stuff that all came, my dirty boxing, all that came from Randy and Team Quest. Um, you know, but man, they made me tough, dude. They made me real tough. And definitely, if you go back and you watch some of my first fights, that's what you see. You see a kid out there that's way outskilled, but just refuses to lose, and just takes a beating. And you go, how did he win that? How did he finally, get the knockout of the submission? Um, and also, because of the childhood, I was a punk destined for nothing, off the street. So man, I was fighting to the death when I was fighting back then, and that's how it worked out.
That's a good trait to have, being just being that tough and not giving up, because you never know if you're losing in a fight. You can always come back and win if you just are tough and then you never give up.
That's
Because
it, man.
if you give up, then you've already lost.
I can't tell you how many times, even in the UFC, I've fought and then I go read the review the next morning on Sherdog or something, and they're like, Chris Leben gets lucky again, and it's like, one, I trained my ass off, and two, I just don't give up. I didn't give up, and eventually, the opportunity came.
Yeah. Speaking of the UFC, you make it to the UFC. You did the Ultimate Fighter. Then they bring you on after that. You had that fight on the finale, and then they give you a contract, and then you have a pretty nice career. What is your favorite fight in the UFC?
Man, that's always a tough question because, at the time, every fight is your biggest fight, you know, um, after I got that contract, my next fight was Patrick Cote, who had just fought and just dropped Tito, before he fought me, and we had a war. That at the time was an epic fight, Obviously, I had that opportunity to fight my hero Vanderlei Silva, scared to death. I took that fight. I thought for sure I was going to lose, but I grew up. I used to walk across, catch the bus across town to go to this old Japanese toy store where I could rent these bootleg prides and watch Vanderlei fight. Even
Oh,
before
nice.
that Team Quest, I was doing that. So it was an honor to fight him. Obviously Terry Martin basically had knocked me out on my feet. You know what I mean? So and I was able to come back and win there. Everybody quotes my Akiyama fight.
Yeah, I was gonna say everybody raves about that one because I believe that's the one right after Silva. I believe it was where you took it on short notice.
Yeah, I fought Aaron Simpson, who was undefeated at the time. Um, Ended up winning, beat him, and then fought Akiyama 2 weeks later. So that was pretty good. And I mean, honestly, the Akiyama fight. I tell you a funny story. After the fight, walking back, I looked over at my coach Burton Richardson. I said, "What was that? About halfway through the second round?" And he's like, "No, man, there was like 10 seconds left in the third." but I was so rocked, I didn't even remember the third round at all. And you could see about halfway through the second round, I got hit with something and basically went into autopilot at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a great one. I just watched it earlier today, and I'm like, geez, how did he win that one? Because, like you said, like you didn't know, like you were like it was the third round. You were just thinking it was the second round, and you could kind of tell, but for you to still pull it off was amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah. But then you had your career, then you leave the UFC. How grateful are you that when you signed with Bellator that they caught the condition that you had at that time before it could possibly get worse?
Well,
I believe,
I mean, it saved my life. You know, they say a lot of people with that condition, they never catch it. You know, and honestly, I was, there was a good likelihood that I was going to die from that. You know, I think my ejection fraction on my heart was at like 14%. The doctors couldn't even believe I was walking around. You know, so I really could have, died at any time. It was only a matter of time. Um, Luckily, that was a big influence, though, to help me get clean and sober, change my lifestyle, um, which I did. And then, ultimately, several years we kept going back to the cardiologist, and it continued to get better. Um, so thank God for that.
it's crazy to hear all these stories now of these guys either getting traded or just signing with another company and then having these physicals and then finding this out. Like that's why it's great for people to get physicals because you never know when you can catch something like this that could save your life. Uh,
Absolutely.
but you retire, like you stayed retired after that, and then I think flash forward like 5 or 6 years later, you go to compete in the BKFC. What led to you coming out of retirement to compete for bare knuckle?
Well, so what happened was, I started sobering up and training and working on getting sober before I signed with Bellator. I retired from the UFC. My last fights didn't work out the way I want them to because my battles in the cage or outside of the cage were just getting too intense for me to keep up with. I wasn't able to quit in time for the fights and everything else. And, ultimately, I started sobering up and training hard. Next thing I know, I'm beating up all 20-year-olds in the gym. I'm like, fuck, man, I'm performing better than I ever have. I got a clear head. Of course, I kept turning white and having to lay down. My coach kept thinking I was going to pass out and make me lay down because that was my bad heart, but I didn't know it at the time. I thought I was just getting old.
Yeah.
So, then I was like, well, fuck, I'm going to try to fight. Sign that contract with Bellator. Went to the doctor. They told me you'll never fight again. They told me we need to put a vehibulator, inside your body. You can't do jiu-jitsu with it. I told them to fuck themselves and did jiu-jitsu every single day after that. And just didn't put any of the bad stuff in my body. Started eating organic, moved next to the beach, changed everybody I hang out with, got clean and sober. And I kept going back for those next couple of years to the cardiologist and like, well, your ejection fraction's great. It's not at 14%. You don't need a new heart anymore, but you need a pacemaker. Well, guess what? You don't even need a pacemaker anymore. This is great, but you still can't do physical activity. And I didn't tell him I'm working out every day. You know, and then continued back to the point where she goes, well, this, I don't know what's going on. This is a miracle. Your heart is at, basically what we consider a low end of normal now. And she said that to me. And remember my old lady was sitting next to me, and I said, well, if that's the case, would you consider me healthy to fight? And she goes, you can do anything a healthy adult can do. It was like the next day the BKFC called me. It's funny how those things work out.
Yeah.
You
That's crazy
know,
though.
day, and I was like, at first I was like, nah, man. If I'm gonna fight, I'm gonna do MMA, and I'd heard a little bit about this. Was like show 2, So I had heard a little bit about the company and how everybody was hyped on it, but I didn't know that much. Then I got on YouTube that night and started watching it, and I was like, oh my God, this sport was made for me. I mean, it's a small ring, there's nowhere to run, you're just slugging it out. It's brilliant, it's super entertaining, so I called him back and I said, hey, I changed my mind.
What it sounds like happened was because you're eating healthy and then still training, you're keeping yourself active. And then had you probably just like ate healthy and not trained like you did, you might have not gotten to that point that fast. I think you training still while eating healthy kind of helped out because you kept your
I
body.
think so. I mean, there's probably a little bit of risk involved,
Yeah.
Barrett Yoshida, my jiu-jitsu coach. I mean, when I first came back, and they made me at the gym sign a waiver that if I died, it wasn't their fault, and then my coach, I do a round or two, and he'd look at me and he'd tell me, hey, go sit this one out, because I started getting too pale. And that's the way that first year went, man. And I think doctors, they don't want to be liable, so they can't tell you to take those kind of risks, even if that's what does make you healthy.
Mm-hmm. And then now you're still here sitting, and then you had a few fights in the PKFC, so obviously it worked out good for you.
Yeah, life is crazy, man. I'm sober. I had 3 first-round knockouts and 1 5-round war. So I'm happy with that. And now I get to finish my martial arts career with some super exciting fights and some big wins. You know, um, which is much better than the way I finished in the UFC, which was not even answering the bell for the 3rd round, which was horrible for a guy that used to always lay his life on the line out
Yeah.
there. So that was it was huge, and not that you can ever right or wrong, but it does it is definitely more settling, I guess, for me, more relaxed. That last fight, I can really hang my hat and really finished. Had a kind of a big knockout. Slugfest. In old school Chris Leben fashion, man, which is exactly what I was dreaming about. You never know how things are going to work out. And most people don't get to retire on a W, but I got all those things now.
Yeah. Now, what led to you going sober, and how's your mentality now compared to when you were in the UFC?
Well, when I was in the UFC, man, and growing up, super poor, meth house, you know, nobody ever expected me to grow up to be anything. I'm the only person to ever graduate high school from my family. That's including grandma and uncles and everybody. My whole motto was go fast, kick ass, chug beers, crank tunes, dude. Everything in excess, nothing in moderation. Fuck it, live fast, die young, and that's the way I spent my money when I was in the UFC, blew it all, and, you know, that kind of living catches up with you, man. And I actually, there were times in my UFC career when I was doing better on paper than ever, that I was actually more depressed and more sad than I'd ever been. I used to go through these week or 2 week long depressions where I wouldn't even get out of bed. Since I've been sober, I've never had one of those. I was on SSRIs. There's no need for me to take any sort of antidepressant medication anymore now that my brain chemistry is normal. You know, um, Even when the doctors told me if I drank again I was going to die, I still ended up drinking again. And it was really my family, my chick getting pregnant, and me caring enough about myself and about living to want to put in the effort to get sober, in which case I found a group of like-minded individuals, and work some basic steps with those guys, and that worked for me. It changed my whole life. I might not make the kind of money that I made in the UFC now, but I'm extremely happy. I'm content, and I got more money in the bank now. Funny thing than I ever did when I was in the UFC. It's crazy when you don't give it to the bartender; it just stays in the bank account. So man, I I can't the blessings and the rewards that have been given to me are just I can't even put words to them.
Yeah, that's something money can't buy.
That's
But
it.
one of the two questions I have left to ask you is what led to you going to Herb Dean and learning how to referee? I read that you went to his referee school, I believe it is,
I did.
learned how to ref, and then
I
you're
did.
licensed in, was it California?
Yeah, so I'm a referee and a judge in California for CAMO, California Amateur Martial Arts Organization. Eventually I would like to work for CSAC, and do Bellator, UFC, BKFC, Combates, all these bigger shows, these pro shows. That's my goal. Multiple reasons I decided to do that. I've always wanted to do it. I think that somebody that fought their whole life might make a good, referee. When a guy's had enough, when a guy's still in the fight, those sort of things. Um, at the time, I wasn't allowed to fight, and it kept me around my people, around in the game, in the fight game. I was driving somewhere in California every weekend, talking to fighters and coaches and corners and reffing and judging and being a part of the sport that I love. And now, um, having been fighting and reffing and judging, I respect it even more, man. It is a difficult job. I didn't think it would be nearly as hard as it is. Even somebody with all the fights that I've cornered, you know, I take it very, like I said, I take it very seriously. I love doing it. You know, Number one is trying to keep those fighters safe, but you want to keep them safe, but you want to give them every chance possible. You know, um, calls have to be made. The refs take a lot of crap, man. They got to make split-second calls. With lives on the line type decisions. Um, and so hopefully once California opens back up, I can get right back to doing that, man. I miss it.
How's the preparation?
Well, you know, uh, I mean, honestly, for the course, the course was extremely difficult, and I think out of everybody that signed up for Herb's course, I may have been the only one to pass that out of that group. Um, I know that Big John is extremely strict too. I saw him at a function, and once as soon as he knew I'd become a referee, and he immediately started grilling me. So that so here's the situation. No, no, what do you do? And I like that about it. They're always we're all always grilling each other, questioning each other. How can I have improved? How can I have done better? So ultimately, you got to study. You got to know the up to date rules. You have to be able to pass the course. Another part that a lot of people mess up on is there's a part where you have to you know you have to be able to show them every jiu-jitsu move, and you also have to be able to point out where you would apply pressure to stop the move. Like, for example, if somebody's in a heel hook and they're not letting go, how do I save the guy from losing his ACL on bottom? Well, you don't grab the ankle, right? You got to keep the guy from leaning back on the heel hook. So you're going to grab the back of his head and keep him sitting up. Which is difficult, because you're in charge of a lot as a referee, and as a judge. you know we had to continually watch tape. Was that a 10-8 round or a 10-9 round? You scored a 10-8. Why? Give me three reasons that's a 10-8 round. Where's the foul? Do you DQ him? Do you take a point? Do you give him a warning? Why? There's a lot to it. It's both studying and then also a lot of on the job training.
Now, the last thing I wanted to ask you before I let you go, how is it being a father now?
Man, it's the most amazing thing. You know, my little boy's 3. He locked himself in the car yesterday. That was a wonderful experience. I had to break the back window out. You know, so it's sometimes it's the most stressful, most fear I've ever had. Best thing that ever happened to me. You know, if that even makes sense. You know, people say, "Oh, you're pregnant."
Yeah.
I say, get ready, man, because you're not going to sleep at night. You guys are never going to have time to be intimate. You know, you're always going to be dealing with the baby, and it's going to be the best thing that ever happened to you. It doesn't make if you don't have a kid, you don't understand. But you know, I'm super grateful, and I'm grateful that I waited till I somewhat had my shit together to have a kid, so that I'm always here for him. I can spend time with him. He's only known me as being sober. You know, he's just finished his today's Wednesday. He just finished his 2nd week in jiu-jitsu. You know,
Oh, nice.
every day it's something new. You know, he says something new. He learns something. You know, and I couldn't. I couldn't spend enough time with him. There's no way. Every time I have to leave the house, I feel bad.
Which is great. It's great to see like where you were at then and where you're at now. It's like a totally different person, and then it's just great. Like I myself, I have 3 kids, so 15 months, 6, and then 11. So I know what it's like to have a kid. It's crazy. Like it starts out crazy in the beginning, but it's well worth it when they get older.
That's it, man.
Yep. But I just wanted to thank you so much for coming on with me. I know you have a busy schedule, and just want to thank you once again for coming on.
Well, thanks, man. Thank you.
Yep. You have a nice day.
All right, brother. Bye-bye.
Bye. And once again, I want to thank him for coming on. That was MMA legend Chris Leben. You can follow him on social media at Chris Leben MMA. And then this is Cage My IQ. You can follow us on Twitter at Cage IQ, Facebook at Cage My IQ SB, and on Instagram at Cage My IQ. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you have any questions or comments, just send it to us on the comment section on YouTube. And tune in every Monday at 8:30 and every Thursday at noon for your MMA coverage from Cage My IQ. See you guys next time.
Thank you for watching this episode of Cage My IQ on the Sports Box. Please remember to follow us on all of our social media outlets. On Facebook at Sportsbox Show, Twitter at Sportsbox Show, Instagram at The Sportsbox Show. Find us on YouTube and join Outside the Box, our Facebook sports discussion group. The Sports Box is brought to you by our sponsor, Showcase Sports in Hamilton. Showcase Sports for the elite athlete. And also our friends over at CrowdPlay. Download the free CrowdPlay app today and use promo code THEBOX at sign up for 10 free points. Thank you for joining us.